Hey, how's it going, guys? In this video, I'm going to cover how to use Google Gmail and Drive API to download Gmail attachments to your Google Drive account in Python. Alright, so this is going to be a pretty advanced tutorial. Before we get started, make sure that you have a client JSON file, and as well as download the google.py source code from the link in the description below. Alright, so let's take a look at the expect result. So here in my Gmail account, I'm going to use these two emails for this exercise. In this account, both emails have attachments. So for email number 1, I have the CSV file, and for email number 2, I have 3 files. One is a Python file, and this one's a JSON file, and another Python file. And I want to write a program to automatically download these attachments, but I don't want to put all the attachments in a single folder in my Google Drive. And I want to be able to organize my files by creating a folder and giving the email subject name. So here, let's take a look at this folder. So this is what the output looks like. So for this Google Drive folder, I'm using the email subject as the folder name, as well as the folder ID in case if I need to reference the folder ID for any automation purpose, then it's easier for me to do a search. And as well as in case if your emails or multiple emails share the same subject name. So sometimes when your friends or anyone else send your email with a subject, in that case, we can easily use the folder ID. Actually, this is not the folder ID. This is the email ID. We can use the email ID to identify which email we want to locate. And with that being said, let's get started. So I'm going to activate my virtual environment. In case if you don't know what libraries to install, you can find all the information in the description below. For this program, I'm going to import the IO library and the base64 library to download the attachments. From Google API client.http, I want to import the media IO base upload class. And lastly, from Google module, I want to import a create service function. I'm going to move line 4 to the top. Alright, so we'll be using the Gmail API and the Google Drive API. I'm going to create a couple functions to simplify my code creation process. So I'll name this function construct service. And for this function, I'm going to have a parameter called API service. And basically, with this function, we want to use this function to construct different Google API service. So it can be Gmail service, Google Sheet service, or Google Drive service. So from the top, I want to create my variable first. And this one's going to be client service file path. You can always modify the function however you want. And here I'm going to grab my client secret file path. I'm going to remove the beginning. So I'm going to remove the folder path, and that leaves me with just the file name. Next, I want to insert a try except block. So for the exception, I want to print the error if any error occurs. And I want to return none. Now let's go back to the try block. So here, if the API service name is equals to Drive, then I want to construct the Drive API service instance. So we need to provide the API name, API version, and it's going to be v3, and the scopes value. And it's going to be a list. And here, let me grab the scope value. Then I want to return the service instance. And to do that, I'm going to insert my create service function. And I'll provide all the required values and scopes. And that's for the Google Drive service instance. Now for the Gmail service instance, so we'll basically do something very similar. And this one's going to be Gmail. And I'm going to copy these 4 lines and paste. And I'm going to change the variable names. So this one is going to be Gmail. And for Gmail, we're still on version 1. And for the scope value, it's going to be https mail.google.com. We need to make sure that we insert the / at the end. Alright, so that's for the construct service function. For the next function, this function is going to go to your Gmail account or the user's Gmail account and search for emails that met the criteria. So for this function, I'm going to name this function search email. And we need to provide the service instance, the query string, and label IDs. So this one's optional. And we're going to set the label IDs default with empty list. And again, I'm going to insert my try except block first. Except that for this function, I'm going to return none. I'm not going to print any error message. Now let's go back to the try block. Now within the try block, I want to make an API code to the Gmail service. So reference the service object .users .messages .list. And this is going to be the method that we're going to use to search for any emails with attachments. And the list method takes 3 parameters. So we need to provide the user ID. And we can use the special value me to represent the current user account. Next, we need to provide the label IDs. The label IDs are basically, let me show you what label IDs are. So the folder on the left are label IDs. So we have inbox label ID, start label ID, snooze label ID, sends, drafts, important, schedule, all those are label IDs. And with Gmail API, if you don't provide any label ID, then it's going to assume that you want to search for every single folder in your Gmail account. And the third parameter is the query parameter. So this is going to be the query text that you want to provide to search for emails that met the criteria. And I'm going to store the output as message. Actually, let's name this message list response. And since by default you get 50 emails per page. And to be honest, from the documentation, here let me put the documentation over. Give me a second. Alright, so if we look at the parameters, the max results is the maximum number of messages to return. And from the description, it seems like it can enter any number. I usually just don't put the max results parameter since for the Gmail API, we have unlimited quota to use. So it doesn't matter if we provide the max results or not. Alright, so here I'm going to extract the email message items. And I want to store the items in an object called message items. And from the message list response object, I want to grab the messages. In case if there are multiple pages of results that we need to retrieve, then we need to get the next page token. Now I can insert a while loop. So while next page token is not none, then I want to continue to retrieve the messages. So here I'm going to insert my service object .users index.messages.list. Basically, I'm going to write the same statement again. So actually, I can just grab these 3 lines and I'll copy and paste. Except that here we need to provide the next page token ID. So for the page token parameter, we need to provide the next page token value. And I'm going to copy paste these 2 lines. And we need to extend the list. So here I'm going to change the equal sign to extend. And finally, I want to return the message items. Oh, and I need to indent these 2 lines. Alright, so that's the search email function. Now let's continue. We got 2 more functions to create. So this function is going to get the email message informations. I'm going to name this function getMessageDetail. For this function, we'll take a service instance, message ID, and the format that I want to return the message detail. I'll set the default to metadata only. And the last parameter is the metadata headers. And we're going to set the default to empty list. Now I'm going to insert my try except block. Proficiency. And for this function, I do want to print the error message and return none. Alright, so here I want to name the output message detail. And I want to insert my service argument .users .messages .get. For the user ID parameter, I'm going to assign the value me, and we need to provide the message ID, format, and the metadata header. Actually, metadata headers. Let me just double check. It goes to metadata underscore headers. And return message detail object. Alright, so that's for the getMessageDetail function. The next function and the last function we're about to create is the function to create a folder in a user's Google Drive account. And I'll name this function create folder in Drive. And we can provide a folder name. In case if we want to create a folder inside another folder, so we can provide the parent folder ID. And since we can assign multiple parents, so we need to provide a list. And for this function, I'm not going to insert the try except block. I'm going to directly create the dictionary to store the metadata information. And I'll name the dictionary file metadata. And we need to provide 3 things. The folder name, the parent folder ID, and it's going to be a list, and the MIME type. And it's going to be application / vnd -apps.folder. Now we can make the API code to create the Google Drive folder. So here I've got one more parameter, so service, and it's going to be service.files.create. And for the body parameter, we need to provide the file metadata object. And for the fields, I only want to return the ID information, the execute. And here I want to return the file object. Now we're done with creating all the functions. Now we can write the script to perform the automation. Here, let me insert a note. So this one is going to be step number 1. Create service instance. Actually, let's name this Google service instances. I want to create a Gmail service instance. So I want to insert the construct service function. I'm going to type Gmail to construct the Gmail service instance object. And for the drive service instance, I'll name the service object as drive service. Now if I simply just run the script, now I want to select the account that I want to give the program access to. And when you get to this page, click on Advanced and click on this link to proceed. And click Allow to give permission to the program. Now we need to grant permission to the Drive API. And let's take a look. So it seems like there's an error message. Alright, so let's just do a quick check. No attribute replace. Let's take a look. I don't see any replace method. Here, let me try again. So here's the Gmail token file. Now let me run the script again. Now it's going to ask me to authenticate the access for the Drive API. Okay, so this time it's working. I assume we authenticate the other service instance too quickly. So to fix that, here let me import the time module. So let's delay the drive service creation by 1 second. So time, wait, and let's wait 2 seconds after we construct the Gmail service object. So let me try again. So I'm going to delete both token files. Now let's try again. I'm going to select my dummy account. And here time.wait. Oh, it should be sleep. Alright, so that seems to solve the issue. Now let's continue. So we have the Gmail service instance and the Drive service instance. We can now manipulate both Gmail and Google Drive. This is going to be step number 2. Search emails. So let's do and search email with attachments. And we're going to create a variable called query string, and this is going to be the query text that I want to provide to our Gmail API to search for any Gmail message with attachments. So it's pretty easy. The query has colon attachments. It's your attachment. In case if you want to search for a particular email, then you can provide the subject. If you want to search for emails with attachments from certain person, then you can insert the from parameter. Now I want to search for my emails. So insert the search email function. And we need to provide the service instance. And this one's going to be Gmail service. And the query string. As well as the folder that I want to search for the emails. I only want to search for emails in my inbox folder. I'll name the output as email messages. Oh, and step 2. And step number 3 is when everything happens. So this one's going to be download emails. Actually, this should be download emails and create Drive folder. So the Gmail API, there are actually many bugs and many things that it's not easy to navigate. That's why I was still on version 1. And it took me a couple days to research and discover and to experimenting how to retrieve attachments from an email message. So here I'm going to insert a loop for email message in email messages. And here's a typo, email message. And we need to grab the message ID. And the email message ID is going to be coming from the thread ID. Next is the message subject. And here I'm going to set the default subject. If an email does not have a subject, they want to set the default subject title, no subject. And I want to insert the message ID. And I'll show you why I'm doing things this way in a second. The next item I want to retrieve is the message detail. And within the message detail object, the attachments by data is contained in this object. So I want to insert the get message detail function. And my first parameter is here, let me do this. So create another view so I can look at my script side by side. Right, so here's my get message detail function. And we need to provide the Gmail service object and the email ID. So from email message, I want to reference the ID value. And the ID value is different from the third ID. So the email message ID is the parent email object ID. And for the format, so it's going to be 4. Since I want to retrieve everything from an email object, that's why I need to set the format value to 4. And here, let me put that in a separate line. For the metadata headers, and since I only want to download the attachments, so I want to reference the parts value. And that's for the message detail object. And I'm naming this object message detail payload. From message detail object dot get, I want to reference the payload ID value. And from the message detail payload object, I want to grab the headers information. This statement is going to return as a list. Here, let's run it first. So I'll put break right here. And I'm going to comment out this line. And let's just print the message detail payload object to see what the output looks like. Okay, and here I have a typo. Let's take a look. Right, so this is where the fungus started. We need to debug the script. Right, so this statement returns none. So let's take a look. Search email. And to troubleshoot, I'm going to remove the try except block. I'll fix that later. Okay, so it's this one right here, this line right here. So I have a typo. This should be message list response. Now the issue is fixed. Let me put a try except block back. Oops, it should be right here. Alright, let me try again. Alright, so from the email message object, we have a list. And if I go back to my Gmail account, currently in my Gmail account, I have two emails with attachments. So email number 1 and email number 2. Here, let me do this. I'm going to send an email to myself, except that for this email, I'm not going to have any attachment. So test, and no attachment in a message body. Right. Now if I run the script again, I should expect the same result as this line right here. So let me try again. Indeed, based on this query string, only 2 emails met the criteria. Now let me delete this line right here. I also want to mention that, so here we have 2 values. One is the email message ID, and the other value is the thread ID. Here, let's print the message detail payload object to see what the output looks like. Alright, so here's the output, and it's pretty messy. If you can read it, then good for you. And for me, it took me about like 10 minutes to understand the structures and all the information associated to the message payload object. And here we have let's look for the attachments. So usually how I look at it is I look at the my type. Alright, so this word seems to get pretty complicated. Based on the my type, you can have so the attachments is going to store within another subpart. So you can have, here, let me do this. So attachment usually can be stored in 2 different places in a message object. So here we have an email message. In the first place, the attachments can be located is the parts reference. And sometimes based on how a user sends the attachments can be stored within parts and another part. So you have you have another layer that you need to check. And that's why downloading email attachments is a pretty complicated process. Now let's continue. Now I want to array the headers. Oh, this should be for item in message detail payload headers. And I want to check the object first. So if item name, then I want to check against the value. And I know for this email subject, we have a valueless subject name. We have a valueless subject name. So we can replace the message subject value with the subject name and the message ID. So the subject name is going to be coming from item value, and he'll have the message ID. Oops, let me close this. We can actually, let me do this. I will move this line right here to the else statement. I think that'll be, let me check. Okay, I think that looks okay. And the easiest way to check is print the message subject. And let me run. Let me try again. Okay, so here we have the message subject. So the first one will have a valid subject name. So package drive file downloader. And the other email, let's go back. It's an email without the subject. So the else statement is going to be the statement to assign the subject name. Now let's create the Google Drive folder based on the subject name. So here, let me insert notes, create a Drive folder. I want to insert my create folder in Drive function. Let me check the function name. Oh, create folder in Drive, is that right? Okay, create folder in Drive function. And we need to provide the Drive service object and the message subject. And want to grab the ID value. And we'll send the ID value to a variable called folder ID. Now let me delete these two folders. I'll delete all the files. Let me see. Okay, those are not files. Right now my Google Drive account is empty. So if I run the script, it's going to create two folders, and the folder name is going to be based on the email subject name. So here's the no subject followed by the email ID, and here's the package drive file downloader email subject followed by the email ID. And let me delete these two folders. Alright, so at this point, we have the email subject name. You also create the folder associated to an email in our Google Drive account. Now we need to retrieve the attachments. So here I'm going to insert if statement to check if the passkey is in the message detail payload object. And if this condition is met, then I want to array the list object associated to the passkey. So for message payload, in message detail payload parts. Actually, I want to use the get method. Let me see. Actually, that should be fine. So parts. I want to grab the my type. And the file name. And it should be lowercase. And the body information. And here I want to do a check. So if attachment ID is in the body object, then I know the attachments by data is stored in the body object. So I want to grab the attachment ID first. Then I can download the attachment. So from the Gmail service object, .users, .messages, .attachments, .get. We need to provide the user ID, message ID, and the attachment ID. Now we have the byte data stored in this response object. Now we can retrieve the byte data using the base64 library. So here I'm going to type base64.url save b64 decode. And from the response object, I want to get the data. I also want to encode to UTF-8. Now we need to do one more thing. So from the IO library, we want to convert that to a bytes IO object. So I want to insert the bytes IO method. It will provide the file data object. Alright, so at this point we can load the file to the Google Drive folder. So we need to create the file meta object. For the name, it's going to be coming from the file name. And from line 109, so this statement right here, we have the folder ID. So we can assign that to the parents parameter. In case you want to load the attachments to multiple folders, then you can assign multiple folder IDs. And because we're using Google Drive API service, then we need to do things Google's way. With Google API, we need to first of all convert the byte data to a media IO based upload object. And here I'll insert the FH object and the MIME type. For the chunk size, let's do this. Let's do 1024 times 1024. That seems to be the default people use these days. For the resumable value, I'll set the default value to true. I'll name the output as media body. Now let's upload the attachment to our Google Drive folder. So to do that, so from the drive service .files .create, and here we need to insert the .execute statement. For the body parameter, we'll provide the file metadata dictionary and media body. For the fields, I only want to return the ID field. And that's it, right? So this is everything for the script, and took me a while. I think this is pretty much it. Alright, so let's give it a test. So currently in my Drive account, the account is completely empty. Now if I run the script, oops. Alright, so we have our first error. Actually not the first. Here, let me double check. My type is invalid. So this should be lowercase t. Let me try again. Okay, so another one, chunk size, and this one doesn't have underscore. Oh, and here's another typo. Let me see, resumable. Right, so I hope that's the last mistake. Okay, so it seems like the script is running successfully. Okay, so it took about 13.7 seconds. And here's the attachment. So for no subject email, there's only one attachment. I know for the other email there are 3 attachments. So drive.py, GUI.py, and the client secret file. And if I double click to open the file, I can see the Python code is embedded to the GUI.py file. Alright, so this is everything I want to share in this video. And since this is one of the most requested video that people are asking. But yeah, so this is pretty much everything. And as always, thank you guys for watching. I'll see you guys on the next video.